Thanks, Rosie. So brief introduction to Community Energy Scotland. Just so for those of you who may not be aware, I realise that quite a few of you today will be, but I don't want to leave anybody out. So just to let you know that we are a member-led independent organisation. We provide practical and technical support for community groups and organisations with their project development. And we can come along at whatever stage or stages our members want us to be with them, to support them. We can be there from the very start of the conversation, through planning stages, community consultation, statutory paperwork, funding bids, technical help, whatever the project owners want us to help them with. It's important to note that we're not a funding organisation, but we do work with finance support organisations, for example, like Foundation Scotland here today, and also grant funders to support our members. We also enable our members to link up and network with each other, and we create what we hope is insightful opportunities within the community energy sector. We work in partnership with community groups and others who share our values, building their understanding and capacity to create more democratic, sustainable and low carbon solutions. Behind the scenes, and this is something that not everybody is always aware of about Community Energy Scotland, but we act as the collective voice of community groups in Scotland who are looking to develop and maintain low carbon solutions. We represent our members at the Scottish and UK government levels and also at industry level to help influence policy and other decision making for the sector. So just to clarify and to make sure the context is clear with regards to community energy, it is broad. We don't just mean energy generation. When we talk about community energy, it could mean organisations working on delivery of energy efficiency advice, for example, collective retrofitting work, heat networks, sustainable transport and its infrastructure, and the list goes on. The Energy Learning Network, or ELN, as it's known for short, is a UK-wide programme where we work with our counterparts in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, plus two UK-wide partners, Ashton Climate Solutions and the Centre for Sustainable Energy. It's a 4-year programme which started last year and it's funded by the National Lottery. The ongoing plans of the programme are shaped by feedback from our members, and the advisory board is made up of community energy organisations and others with community energy interests. The programme itself builds on the work already being delivered by the community energy sector, helping to scale community low carbon projects by helping to develop communities' capacity in the form of growing the sharing of knowledge and expertise, facilitating networking opportunities and enhancing resources to support community energy projects. And throughout the ELN programme, we also work alongside other enabling organisations and local authorities. The programme offers a free peer mentoring service for members. That is fully subscribed at the moment, but we are hoping to roll that out further. There are UK-wide online events, as well as those hosted by ourselves, as today, for example. So please keep an eye on our social media and also our ELN project and resources web pages. And you can also keep an eye on our events diary dates on the homepage of our website. You can find previous webinar recordings and on the ELN project and resources pages also. So thank you for your attention, and I'm going to hand you over to Rachel Searle at Foundation Scotland.
Thanks very much, Kath, and also thanks in advance to Rosie, who's going to drive the slides because of some issues my end. So thanks for that. Apologies in advance for the next slide, please. Repeat that will go on for the next few minutes. Thanks to Community Energy Scotland on behalf of Community Energy Fortnight for inviting us along to take the lid off, or just discuss, put forward some of the opportunities and challenges of community benefit funds drawing particularly on our experience of working in Scotland. And hello to some of you who I know, and those of you who I don't know. I hope this is an interesting and stimulating few minutes for you. Just as a headline on Foundation Scotland, for those of you who may not have come across us before, thanks Rosie. I was just going to highlight that we're a community foundation. We're Scotland's community foundation. We're an independent charity, and our primary role is distributing other people's money, really, and that money can come from different sources. It could be individuals, families, or organisations, corporates, or indeed other trusts or foundations that may not have a presence in Scotland. And we're been growing in size over the last financial year. We distributed over 32 million to just under 4,000 different kinds of community organisations across Scotland. So I think I was just talking to a colleague from Wales. So you may or may not be familiar with the Welsh Community Foundation. We're part of a global network of community foundations like our counterpart in Wales, and community foundations tend to operate on a bit of a Robin Hood model. So we accept that we can't overnight change the tax system, really. So we try and do and make some effort at wealth distribution by kind of raising funds locally and then redistributing them through different kinds of funding programs. Thank you, Rosie. Part of the work that I work on in Foundation Scotland, along with a team of colleagues, is specifically around place-based funding. So I'm just going to focus specifically on our community benefit funds, drawing on our experience, and I'll come on to our experience in a moment. In the chat, can I just invite you to just contribute to the chat if you have practical experience of a community benefit fund around where you stay. It might be as part of the structure that governs that fund, or it might be as a recipient of some funding from it. So if there's anyone in the webinar who has some direct experience of community benefit funds, whether you're in Scotland or not, please just pop that in the chat, because that will help me identify the kind of level of experience in the room in terms of operational experience of community benefit funds. So thanks for doing that. So just a couple of headlines in terms of what community benefit funds are. They're basically a mechanism to enable communities to benefit from energy projects in their area. They are usually provided in the form of an annual payment, although not always. Sometimes funds can be drawn down in advance. Usually they operate for the operating lifetime of the asset, and they may well be part of what's called a wider community benefit package. So for example, the CCBF logo there is actually Crossdykes Community Benefit Fund, who the communities there in Dumfries and Galloway were able to achieve a shared ownership arrangement with Muirhall Energy on top of receiving a community benefit fund payment from the different now owner of that project. To date, community benefit funds have been provided voluntarily, and historically predominantly through onshore wind, although there are many different, other technologies have stepped up and provided community benefit funds as well. Just on this slide, I just wanted to highlight that our experience of community benefit funds is not only from commercial scale projects. For example, I've given RWE as one of the many developers we work quite closely with on projects in Scotland. But Awesome Energy and Rumbling Bridge are both community benefit societies. So they're both societies that own and operate their own hydros, their own energy assets. but their boards have determined that they also want to provide a community benefit fund in their area. We're connected in with those because those boards have approached us to support them in administering those funds. The other arrangement I wanted to alert you to, the one on the left, well, my left, Kilgalliach Community Fund. That's a large community fund down in Dumfries and Galloway. And the arrangement there is that a trust was formed when that project was developed a few years ago. So the funds are held by that trust, and that trust is comprised of local people who step up into the role of directors. The membership of the trust is community councils across the 28 communities that the Kilgalliach Fund covers, and they appoint the directors. But again, that trust, once it received that fund, that the fund was challenged by how to administer it. So our involvement is in the background. We support the administration of that fund. So I just wanted to kind of give a sense that community benefit funds are definitely not a one size fits all arrangement, and they reach across different technologies, and there are different owners who provide those funds. Thanks, Rosie. I just wanted to highlight two resources that are available for you to kind of interrogate as much or as little as you have time for, and where you can find out a bit more about community benefit. One is the Scottish Government's revamped register on community benefit, which is it's becoming helpfully more populated. It's a development from a previous version, which was really quite clunky. This is still quite clunky, I would say, and actually includes quite a range of energy technologies, for example, like heat pumps, which I still don't quite understand how that might provide community benefit beyond actually the benefit of obviously having those heat pumps in operation. But I'm not aware of heat pumps providing any community benefit funds per se, but maybe one of you on the call knows more about that. But that register is going to grow to be an even better resource than it is currently for finding out more about community benefit funds. And it's the drive behind it was around both accountability and transparency of arrangements across Scotland. The other resource I just wanted to highlight, thanks Rosie, is a Community Benefit Toolkit. We actually wrote this on behalf of the Scottish Government in 2019-20, and although we're now 5 years down the line, I think it still has currency for anyone looking to set up or explore what's involved in setting up and operationalising a community benefit fund. There's one chapter in there about getting the governance right that I'll refer to when I come on to talk about one of the challenges in operating community benefit funds. Thanks, Rosie. Just before I come on to some of the opportunities and challenges, I just wanted to give you some headlines about our work in this space. So we've been working on community benefit funds with communities and developers for over 15 years, and on that register of community benefits that I highlighted a few minutes ago, it's showing about, I haven't checked today actually, so forgive me if I'm wrong, but it's showing about 30 million as flowing into Scotland's communities over the last 12 months. We have touch points with about 12 million of that. So our reach across community benefit in Scotland, you can see, is quite significant. Those we work alongside are both commercial developers, like I've just explained, and also community organisations who will be holding funds themselves and may want some independent third-party support in doing that. And we have a national team based across Scotland, from Stornoway up to Dunnet Head, down to Stranraer, across to Stow in the borders. So whilst we're obviously not within every community which we work alongside or support, we're generally close-ish by. Thanks, Rosie. In terms of what we actually do, there are kind of 4 key areas where we work in. We support developers and communities to establish funds. We steward them, contribute to policy and practice, and share knowledge and learning. Just a couple of points about some of those. In terms of supporting developers and communities to establish those fund arrangements, when work started on this, particularly in Scotland in the early 2000s, there wasn't really any guidance or rule book. We talk very much about practice having evolved in Scotland, and I think ourselves and other organisations in Scotland have very much been part of that evolution. So what we have in terms of the ability to support developers and communities is quite a lot of experience, which we've tried increasingly to write up in different forms. But for example, there can be lots of arrangements where multiple communities have the opportunity to get involved. How actually do you take a discussion across multiple communities forward in a way that's ideally consensual, democratic, and coordinated to some degree? We've developed some practice around how to do that, whether or not we then go on to actually manage or administer the fund or have an involvement beyond it getting established. But we would suggest that just as I heard yesterday, actually, an arrangement whereby a developer was keen to involve 4 communities in a fund opportunity and just kind of ask them to go and sort it out. And particularly 2 of those communities do not particularly have a strong relationship. We would say that's not very responsible. That's not suggesting that those 4 communities don't have capacity and ambition and lots of other good things, but sometimes actually some independent brokering or facilitation can help achieve a better process. So we're sometimes involved in that kind of work, or a better outcome. Sorry. In terms of stewarding funds, I use that word quite deliberately. I mean, someone would say, well, isn't that just managing, Rachel, administering funds? It's as simple as that. And to some degree, yes, it is. But for me, the word steward denotes a degree of kind of commitment and care about this work. It also denotes how transformative the work can be, whereas there's an element of administration and management that kind of suggests this is just transactional work. Actually, we would suggest it's far more than that. We do quite a lot of work contributing to and influencing policy and practice, do a lot of work with DTAS and Community Energy Scotland and others are in that space, and we'll highlight a publication at the end that you might want to have a look at. And we're very keen to share knowledge and learning with, very much like yourselves in the Community Energy Scotland network, and very much steeped in the belief that we learn best from our peers ultimately. So we often try and link communities with similar or actually contrasting experiences of community benefit, so they can learn from their peers about the kind of good, the bad, and the ugly. Okay, enough about us. Thanks, Rosie. So I just wanted to share this. Some of you may be familiar with this kind of hierarchy already around, well, it's used in various forms, but in terms of, energy particularly and community energy, I wanted to suggest that, community benefit funds, whilst they don't necessarily compare with the, amazing outcomes that can flow when communities actually own and operate their own assets, and I will have seen plenty about that. you know, we think it's unhelpful to kind of necessarily have an either or approach. And we would say that actually, you know, having the opportunity of a community benefit fund, even though that community or those communities don't have the opportunity of owning any of that project, we would say that still nevertheless can be a significant opportunity for that community. And we would we would kind of suggest it's unhelpful to say that community benefit funds managed well and wisely and supported well, if a community needs support, you know, should not be considered as an amazing asset for that community or for those communities. So I'm suggesting in what I'm sharing with you now that community benefit funds are fundamentally a good thing. They're a good thing, like I say, when they're administered, managed, structured well, when the benefit is tangible, and when they have, you know, good community buy-in, and there's like I say, clear benefit and clear impact. There are some, you know, some funds that maybe are mired in a lack of transparency, where there are gatekeepers, and where those kind of higher standards of good practice don't exist. And unfortunately, if they create a narrative that, you know, community benefit funds are just the poor relation and the crumbs under the table and so on, then we would suggest that's not great. And our focus very much is trying to drive up the good practice in that tier of communities having access to community benefit funds. Thanks, Rosie. So if we take it as read that community benefit funds are a good thing, we would say that fundamentally the opportunity that they offer communities is basically to build community capital. What's significant about community benefit funds, as I'm sure you're aware, is that they are broadly unrestricted, and therefore they not only are they unrestricted, but they should have communities at the centre of the decision making. Now, that in Scotland, I can't speak across the piece for other jurisdictions, but in Scotland, occasionally that's not been the case, where sometimes some parts or some components of a community benefit fund have been channeled through a local authority, and councillors have actually had decision-making power over community benefit funds. But the two things of them being unrestricted and communities being able to, as it were, being the driving seat of where the money goes, means that they are an incredible resource for building all kinds of community capital. And we find this kind of lens, or this kind of perspective, really helpful, because we would say that kind of definition of community capital basically represents all aspects of community life, both tangible and intangible. And whilst I said earlier that good community benefit creates tangible outcomes, often it creates, in doing that, it's creating some of the intangible outcomes as well. So the whole thing around building social capital is really critical, and where and how activities of groups can be supported that are beavering away and enabling people in a community to get better connected, both within that community and also with other communities, I think is significant. So fundamentally, community benefit funds are an asset that can be utilised to produce additional resources. Examples in kind of under human capital, there's, I would say, there's about 30 plus of the community funds that we're connected with now have a dedicated stream on education and training. So through their community action planning, they will have identified needs around providing education and training support for residents, and they've chosen for a component, ring-fenced a sum from their community benefit fund just to provide support for folk across the community to, whether that's learning to drive a forklift truck, or whether that's support for someone to go off to university, or whether that's providing childcare for someone to access a course, whatever it is. But there's dedicated support going in from community benefit funds that are enabling residents of those communities to extend their skills, knowledge, and ideally either become more employment ready, or just develop knowledge and understanding of other things that they want to help on their kind of learning or career path. In terms of built capital, that's kind of fairly obvious, I'd hope, insofar as funds from community benefit funds, grants, and or even repayable grants, where social enterprises may be trading and can ultimately pay back that grant. Some really good awards going in to enable communities to develop assets, build assets that they become owners of. In terms of, I'm thinking of two in New Cumnock at the moment. One is in East Ayrshire, significant funds they've received from the South Kyle Community Benefit Fund that are enabling them to develop a bunkhouse and also a kind of a reuse hub. Thanks, Rosie. The next slide. In terms of financial capital, obviously, just to hone in on that, community benefit funds in and of themselves are a huge financial resource for a community. I mean, I think this kind of cuts to the chase, really, why community benefit funds are so powerful, because it's fairly unusual for communities to have access to, unless they are owning and assets which they are generating enduring income from, and that's the, where they can develop energy projects. That's the huge win of an energy community-led, community-owned energy project. But where they're not having something like that, actually, a community benefit fund provides them with enduring financial capital if they can do what we would suggest these things. The bottom right, some community funds that we know of or work with, communities have decided to actually invest a proportion of that fund, where we can influence those communities to consider, rather than investing it in stocks and shares, investing it into other community enterprises. We think that's the best win of all, and is a really smart way to try and recycle the money. Another way that the financial capital of community benefit funds is working really well is on the bottom left. I tried just to, suggest that actually the leverage achieved with community benefit funds is really significant. We commissioned a study earlier this year of a couple of funds up in the north of Scotland that have together provided just over 2.5 million into 3 communities since 2010. And Bigger Economics, who did that study on our behalf, were able to demonstrate that every pound of community benefit funding has generated between £3.56 and £5.12 in wellbeing benefits for the local area, and around £4.18 in economic value. So the leverage potential of community benefit funds is significant. In the top left, I'm just trying to show there that these community benefit funds, one amazing thing about them is that they are enduring. They are enduring for the lifetime of that asset, or certainly we would advocate should be. And of the many funds that we support, we don't have any incidences of the owners reneging on payments, which I think's, that's a good sign. And then just lastly, up in the top right, a great thing about these funds is actually when they can invest in other social enterprises in their communities, then obviously everyone's going to get a bigger bang for their buck, because that social enterprise is maybe going to be supported with some core costs or something that is going to enable it to develop its work and generate more income. So a huge opportunity with community benefit funds, we would suggest, is this huge opportunity to create and generate even more community capital. A second area I just wanted to highlight in terms of opportunity, thanks Rosie, is that a key thing about community benefit funds is that they're not bound by traditional funding conventions, and this is this is one place where they can innovate and be pretty creative and responsive to community ambition and community situations. So we'll all be familiar with kind of traditional open competitive grant making, and most probably many of us have spent hours applying for funds and then kind of waiting to see basically if we win or lose. Community benefit funds don't have to operate like that. Guided ideally by, you know, some kind of strategy or framework. They can be much more targeted about how the funds get distributed. They can. I mentioned the repayable grant mechanism, which we've used a few times in funds. They can target grants. You know, if there is an obvious service in the community and the community plan, or there is a kind of shared community ambition that service or that organisation needs to do more of what it's doing well. There's no reason why you know, funds can't be you know, long-term arrangements can't be made with those organisations. We're working with a number of communities at the moment who are looking to make 10-year awards to their anchor organisations. So those anchor organisations have security over the long term to develop and continue doing the good work that they're doing. Just to give you a quick example, we worked with some communities bordering Dumfries and Galloway and East Ayrshire, 4 very different communities, very different capacity, at different stages of creating plans for their respective communities. And actually, what we landed on with them was an arrangement whereby each of those communities would receive an assured amount of funds to pay for paid staff, to run their own local community fund, and also to run their own education training schemes. And then there would remain a kind of area-wide flagship fund, which we budgeted for over a kind of initial 2-year period, where communities identified significant flagship projects that they knew they would need funds for. So rather than avoid the kind of open competitive grant making process where all the anchors in those organisations would be competing for funds, we're prototyping an arrangement whereby the larger sums are in the flagship pot are rotated around the communities. So actually the community that had least capacity and was, to be frank, most freaked out by the size of this fund, which is over 1.2 million a year across these 4 communities, that community has got time to get itself ready to receive the equivalent of 750,000 to go into one of its kind of significant capital projects that's now in development. So this whole thing of what we use the kind of rather crude banner of distributing differently, we think is a great opportunity that comes with community benefit funds that we would want to see only grow. But there are challenges too. So I'm just going to highlight a couple of challenges and then I'll stop because I'm sure you'll have some questions. Thanks, Rosie. One key area is around determining, you know, what's a fair and reasonable and just place for that community benefit fund to do its work. You know, should it be the whole of Scotland? Should it be a particular region? Should it be the single village or settlement or community council area where that project is located? Should it always include the local service centre or not? Because it's likely that local community will rely on the service centre for kids to go to school or people to do their shopping or folk to get to some medical services. There's no single answer to this, and up to this point, I would suggest it's been more an art than a science of determining what we would call areas, and others in this space often refer to as areas of benefit. where we've got to, for what it's worth, is that the optimum areas of benefit best reflect how people live their lives. And there are incidences where community benefit funds have created rather artificial or false communities, where people don't have much connection with each other. But we think if at that, I talked earlier about the fund design stage in relation to some of the work we do to support developers and communities to establish fund arrangements. If some thoughtful work can be done at that point around where and how people live their lives and what are often anyway cultural or already embedded social and sometimes political ties between communities, it's likely that a reasonable area of benefit will be better achieved, rather than something as crude as drawing circumferences, drawing circles, or such like, at a distance from the project site. We're involved in funds that have huge variation in terms of size and scale of areas of benefit. Some are local authority wide. Some, in fact, the Unlock Our Future Fund up in the northeast of Scotland covers 2 local authorities, Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire, for a relatively small amount of money. Actually, we're then involved in arrangements like up in Caithness, where a community up in the John O'Groats area from the outset said, yeah, but we're reliant on the rest of Caithness, we're reliant on Wick and Thurso. So whilst it's great to have this fund hitting our area, and there's loads we've got to do in relation to our community action plan, actually we rely on Wick and Thurso. So they targeted for up to 30% of their funds each year to reach into wider Caithness. But certainly defining areas of benefit is a challenge. The other area I just wanted to identify as a challenge, thanks Rosie, is a rather crude slide, forgive me, and it's this whole kind of knotty area of governance, namely who has power in the arrangement, who makes decisions, how others are involved, and how those who are involved are held to account. Money and communities, as we will all know, is messy. And this amazing opportunity for communities themselves to have jurisdiction over these funds has presented many communities and developers with real challenges. I just want to give a quick example of a SCIO in the southwest of Scotland, which covers 8 community council areas, and they have that the members of the SCIO are those community councils. They also have space on their board for up to 5 independent directors, as well as those directors appointed by the community councils. And significantly, they have an independent chair. The community action plan that was developed for that whole area is under the custodianship of one of the local anchor organisations. So what they've evolved there is quite a rich ecosystem of involvement from different community organisations already operating, and a very transparent arrangement for managing the kind of 300k they have to work with at the moment, but which they are hoping will increase significantly over the coming years if projects get built out. There's no perfect way to decide what the governance arrangement for your fund or your community's fund will be. But I would recommend you do go to that governance chapter in that community benefit toolkit, because that sets out some different structures that you could look at that might be helpful. I'm not going to talk in more detail now just because of time. So thanks, Rosie. So just drawing to a conclusion, and Ralph, I noticed you were on the call, so forgive me from doing a shouting out for East Lothian and particularly the East Lammermuir local place plan. I just wanted to highlight this as an example of an approach by a community that is trying to grapple with some of these opportunities and challenges, and highlight that, you know, what they've been led by is creating an ambitious local place plan that they're sharing with, you know, all of the 14 developers of net zero low carbon projects operating or seeking to operate in their area, and basically saying how are you going to help us make sure that East Lammermuir is better in the future than it is now, and certainly even after your project might have been decommissioned. And part of what they're obviously expecting are community benefit funds, but critically what they've done through their local place plan is identify some key priorities they want community benefit to be focused on, one of which is upgrading all properties to a EPC band C or above. Another is developing an active travel network. Another is a public or community transport service. And the other is an ambitious biodiversity gain plan. The reason I'm highlighting that is what they've cleverly done actually is in their priorities for community benefit is they've actually almost ridden roughshod over the issue of territorial boundaries, because other than arguably the headline about decarbonising homes, all those other three priorities will bleed into all their neighbouring communities. You know, biodiversity doesn't know community council boundaries, neither does active travel or community transport. So I would urge you to have a look at their plan and have a look at their website, because they're quite pioneering in what they're doing, not least because then the decarbonising of homes will link to an ambitious plan East Lothian has for its own community-led heat network. But maybe you can invite them, Kath, to your Community Energy Fortnight programme next year, and they can give you an update on how that ambitious community-led energy project is proceeding. Thanks, Rosie. Just to finish off then, I mentioned publication I'd signpost you to. This is worth a look at in terms of trying to grapple with some of the challenges and opportunities of community benefit funds. We wrote that with University of Strathclyde earlier this year, and hopefully that's quite a practical guide. We'd urge you to look at that. And thanks, Rosie. Just there's a summary there of some learning points around these challenges and opportunities. One thing I haven't really highlighted is this last point, that funds do evolve over time. So again, the fact that these funds are not hidebound to kind of much of the convention of traditional funding, that we would recommend that communities approach them with a degree of openness about how they can evolve. And I can give an example of one community where actually the area of benefit has also evolved over time as part of the fund arrangement. And finally, just there, Rosie, thanks, last slide. I've just kind of captured here some of you know what we've observed as community benefit funds at their worst and at their best, and we would urge you to kind of maybe just reflect on that with others in your organisations at the and you have opportunities for community funds maybe coming your way. I'll stop there because I can talk till the cows come home about community benefits. So appreciate some of you may have questions.
Thank you, Rachel. That was great. You did ask during the start of your presentation whether anybody would like to comment in the chat about whether they were involved in community benefit schemes. I don't know if you wanted to pick up on any of those. We have got a question in the chat which Rosie can read out to you otherwise. Rachel.
Yeah, I was just going to say, great that Claire's on the call. So Claire's post, as she said, is funded by a community benefit fund. That came about with an organisation applying for that money, Claire, which is slightly different to the arrangement I'd suggested in that slide, the distributing differently slide, where actually at the outset, which didn't happen with Dornell, but there's no reason it couldn't going forward, Claire. but the with the South Kyle Fund at the outset, the community representatives working on that, on designing that fund, said, actually, we want to ring fence X pounds for development officers. So in effect, the application process was circumvented.
Hyle, is there anyone developing any energy project currently?
Yeah.
That's been responded to by Helen in Hay-on-Wye in Wales. I think there may be, well, there are certainly a couple that we're supporting at Community Energy Scotland, although I'm not involved in that. But we could probably put you in touch with a colleague who is, if you needed more help, Richard. I'd suggest if you just email me, and then I can find out who the best person is for you to speak to. And I'm sure Hailwen will have a chat with you as well.
Hi, yeah, it's Murdoch from Lindsay. And first of all, thanks very much for that presentation. It was really informative. I was particularly interested towards the end of your presentation when you talked about Southwest Scotland, where there was a group, I think, of 6 community councils who were coming together, each putting up a representative. And to help with the governance, there were going to be 5 independent directors. In Lindsay, we may be in a similar situation. We have a very large old public hall that the council has identified that it'll take £6 million to refurbish. And have then said, we don't have £6 million. Would the community like to take over the public hall?
Yeah.
And at present, we're trying to pull something together. As maybe often happens, there's 2 or 3 groups in Lindsay, all interested. And the likelihood is that they'll come together and they'll each put up 1 representative. But a bit like the case you cited, I was keen to get some independent people in there, maybe, if you like, ordinary residents that could be voted in, maybe of 1 or 2 seats for them, just to get some breadth in there. My question was, the 5 independent directors in that case in Southwest Scotland, did they volunteer? Did you go out and, or did the group seek them? Or
yeah, Murdoch, and it's up to 5, so they don't have all those roles filled. But generally, what happens is it's driven by the skills gap. So it's driven by the board recognizing that they don't have all the skills required to do the job they're doing. So then they would literally advertise. Yeah. In a very kind of open and transparent way, because actually, if those, like you say, if those skills exist within the community, all well and good, because then you've got the skill and you've got another. And you've got the lived experience more lived experience on the board. Sometimes it can help to helicopter someone in from out with the area, but generally we know communities do well when they're led and governed by folk who breathe the air.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but advertising is we found working with that board is the way to try and make that happen.
And advertising and accepting people onto that board. If you have no one within the community or within that community council area or whatever, obviously you'll happily accept people from out with the community, but they've got the correct skills. Yeah. That's great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Murdoch. If there isn't another question, I was just going to just reiterate, I think Zoe, if Zoe's still there, Zoe had put in the chat about the
That's fine, Rachel, it's okay. I was going to touch on that before everybody left. Thank you though. Just one quick question actually from me. The costs to the community for Foundation Scotland to manage their funds, is that a fixed cost or does it depend on the value?
Not at all, Kath. Not at all, Kath. I mean,
how does that get agreed?
Yeah, so it gets agreed with us talking to the community about what, first of all, what they want us to do, because sometimes they might want us to do quite a lot, and other times they might just want to check in with us.
Okay, so whether it's
a
light
few
touch
times a year.
or
Yeah, but no, there's not a fixed cost for that. And
Mhm.
increasingly, I would suggest, one, the variations of what the kind of support communities want are growing.
Right. Okay,
Um,
that's
and
interesting to know.
and
Okay.
secondly, we do also, so we're obviously a charity, and so part of our charitable work is giving that support to communities
Sure.
on a no cost basis.
So, okay.
Yeah.
That's lovely. Thank you, Rachel. Sorry, I'm going to have to stop you there because the time is getting tight.
Sure.